And I remember one of the students touching my head and going, "Oh, you're such a short little teacher." And I remember just being like, "Don't touch me." And he was like, "Oh, don't touch you." And he did it again. And I remember, you know, when your tears just start to like form in the corner of your eye, and it was just like, I don't want to be here. Like, I don't want to be here. Teaching has not always been easy for me, especially with 14 years in. I have definitely experienced some things that brought me to my breaking point. And so today in this video, I wanted to share with you guys the class that made me cry every day. At least that's what it felt like. It felt like every time I walked into that room, all I wanted to do was cry. And then there were times that I did cry. So before we actually get into that story, please make sure that you like this video, that you subscribe to my channel if you are new, that you click that notification bell so that you can be notified every single time that I post. Also, hello, my name is Amanda Rose. I'm a teacher in New York City. I currently teach middle school, but for the first 9 years of my career, I was a high school teacher, and that's exactly where this story is heading. We're taking it all the way back to about year 4 when I taught seniors. All right. So just to give you a little bit of backstory, I became a teacher when I was 22 years old. And so at this point in my life, this story takes place when I'm about 25/26. I'm still quite young and I have some experience under my belt, but if you are a new teacher, you know that for the first 2 to 3 years of your career, you're like, what am I doing? And if you're a seasoned teacher, you truly understand how long it has taken you to really master the classroom. So that's the setting. I'm teaching in Brooklyn, New York, and I teach all seniors. My classes were split up into participation in government and economics. And I remember this clear as day. So prior to actually walking into my room and seeing these students for the first time, you know, you like to kiki it up and chat with your teacher friends, and you're sharing rosters and you're talking about particular students. And I remember some teachers telling me like, "Oh my gosh, you have this group, good luck with that group, that period." Now, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that that stuff doesn't faze me, okay? I actually don't like when teachers do that. I see it as a challenge. Like, yeah, you think that kid is difficult? Watch. But they were telling the truth. This class in particular, there was about 3 students that I just could not get to work with me. And you know what that feels like, where you've pulled every single hat out of your bag and it just feels like nothing is working. If anything, it's getting worse. And it got to the point where every time I was about to walk into that room, I truly had like the feeling of dread. Every minute dragged. And I did all the things that teachers say you're supposed to do. Create engaging lessons, make sure that you create things that students are interested in. It did not work. The major issues that I had in that class was, 1, excessive talking. The students just never stopped talking. They would talk across the room. They would talk in the middle while I was talking. It didn't matter. The whole, "I'll wait." They were like, "Okay, so you're gonna wait all period then because we're gonna keep talking." Like, it just truly felt like nothing worked. I remember one student, they would pack up early before the bell and they would just hang out by the door. And I remember one time standing in between like the door and the hallway, which we probably have all done at some point. And I remember one of the students touching my head and going, "Oh, you're such a short little teacher." And I remember just being like, "Don't touch me." And he was like, "Oh, don't touch you." And he did it again. And I remember, you know, when your tears just start to like form in the corner of your eye, and it was just like, I don't want to be here. Like, I don't want to be here. The minute that class dismissed, I ran to my car and I just bawled. I never just felt so disrespected, but most importantly, I truly felt like helpless. But I remember even going to admin and being like, hey, I really need help with this class. It was the first time I ever reached out to admin about a classroom management issue, because if you guys know, that's my whole brand, okay? I feel like I am the classroom management queen, but I had to become that after this class, okay? But I remember reaching out to admin and being like, they don't want to do the work. All they do is copy off of each other. Even when it's an independent assignment, they still end up just taking each other's papers and copying. Like, there was truly no control. I remember admin coming in. Mind you, we had new admin at the time too. So they're not really used to the culture. They don't really know me as a teacher. You know, I barely even have rapport with my bosses. And I remember she comes in and she's just like, you know, looking around, and the students were doing exactly what you would want them to do, of course, because why are they gonna actually act up in front of admin? And I remember it being like a successful lesson. And afterwards, when my assistant principal left, I was like, guys, you see, like, we can do this every day. Like, didn't you enjoy that? Like, how great was that? And they were like, no. I remember in this particular class, this story, so cheating was a really big thing in that class, okay? And this was a couple years ago, so it was before we had like every student with a laptop. Like, no, everybody had their own worksheet. And they would just, again, take each other's papers, but even for tests, they were cheating on tests and quizzes. And it was these two friends that I would always separate, and they didn't listen, they didn't follow through with my instructions, and they would always sit next to each other. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna one them up. I'm gonna create 3 different versions of the test. But all I did was scramble the tests up, right? Version A, B, and C. All I did was scramble up the questions. In the middle of the test, one of the students actually says out loud, we have different tests? I'm like, yes, you do. She goes, yo, number 1 says, da, 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 da. Who has that question? And just started sharing out loud what the questions were and asking people for answers. And you know what I did? Nothing. I did nothing. I did nothing. I did not know how to handle such an extreme situation. That was the first time in my career where I really felt like I need structure, I need control, I need to be the authority figure in this room, and I lacked it completely. I truly do feel like experiencing that class made me tighten up my structure, figure out the type of teacher I actually wanted to be, and really implement classroom management strategies so that I could never experience that again in my teaching career. So let's talk about, where did I go wrong? Because it's so easy to blame the students and say, oh, they. But the truth is, I didn't have the structures in place to prevent a situation like that from ever happening. So here are some lessons that I learned from that experience that I implement today and that I also advise new teachers all of the time. Number 1, you have to create routine and structure. I feel like a broken record every time I give this piece of advice, but it has truly transformed my classroom. You have to have a routine for everything and consequences for when routines and structure is broken. What I learned from that experience is that giving a 0 is not always the best consequence, because there are some students that just do not care about their grade. You can pass out 0s like they're candy and they do not care. But what are other consequences? And if we're being honest, that year I had pressure from admin to also pass those students because my classes were required for graduation. And so even if you feel like giving the 0 is the right thing to do, and 8 out of 10 times it is, you still get pressure from admin to pass students. And so unfortunately, the 0s, the failing them, wasn't the solution that I needed at the time. I needed structure, I needed routine, I needed authority, I needed follow through, okay? And so that is the one thing that I would highly recommend You need a structure for your classroom. Make your classroom predictable, but also issue consequences. What are the consequences when students talk over you? What are the consequences when students come in unruly and they're loud? I even find myself now being like, oh, it's okay, come in, guys, stop talking. No, I need to tighten up my ship a little bit. I need to have everybody walk back outside like your children, line up silently, and when we're ready, we come back in. And how long it takes you to get ready is time that you're eating up to get your assignment done, and it is gonna result in a 0, and it will result in a phone call home. But remember, whatever threats you give, you must follow through. You have to be consistent with your consequences so that students know, you know what, she's not just the cool teacher. She's not just the teacher that I like, or he's the teacher that I think is nice and we fist pump every morning. No, they also have to know that you're about business. 2, you have to learn to say no. Say no to switching seats. Say no to going to the bathroom. Say no to sitting next to your friend. You have to practice saying no and being comfortable with saying no. There are some people that just like to say yes to everything, and then your classroom is a revolving door. If we're being honest with ourselves, and if I was honest with myself all those years ago, I was scared of my students. I was scared. I was scared. I was scared of what they would do. I was scared of how they would react. I was scared that I would lose complete control and that I wouldn't be the teacher in Dangerous Minds that could actually like get my classroom settled. Like, I was scared. I was scared of the reaction, but you cannot be. You have to be confident. You have to walk into your classroom regardless of how old your students are. Seniors in high school down to elementary school students, there is a level of warmth that you have to possess, but you also need to have your yes be yes and your no be no. Students have to know when you're serious so that they can take you seriously. If there's situations where you're constantly flip-flopping or you're unsure of your decisions, or if you seem frazzled, how can a student trust you in the classroom? You have to know, what is the type of teacher that I want to be? What will I allow in my classroom? What is a non-negotiable in my classroom? And then my yeses are yes, and my no's are no, and my consequences, I follow through with it. Next, it's going to sound a little weird, but you have to have responses to things so that you can predict what you will say when a certain situation arises. I like to call this being proactive versus reactive. Thinking about what might happen in the classroom and how you're going to respond to your students. I really have to go to the bathroom. I really this, I really that. I understand that this is important to you, but at this time, the answer is still no. I understand that you want to get that done right now, but you have to finish your classwork first, and then we can revisit the conversation. What are your go-to phrases so that 1, you're treating every student as equally and fairly as possible, and 2, they already know what you're going to say. You know how many times students will say, Miss Rodriguez is going to say this, Miss Rodriguez is say no, Miss Rodriguez is going to say yes. It's because they've already figured out who you are in the classroom, and so that way they know what you're going to say, they know how you're going to react even before you react. My last piece of advice to leave you with is just to not give up. Don't get tired of doing good. Don't get tired of implementing routines and strategies. Eventually, it will pay off. Don't get tired of doing the right thing. Sometimes it can feel so exhausting. Sometimes we just expect students to do the right thing, but our students, they crave structure. They need structure. We need structure in order to not have our classroom feel like it's falling apart. And so establishing routines, establishing consequences that you think are fair, that you yourself find natural and you can follow through with. Seek help from your peers. I would say leave admin out of it unless it's like, putting a student's life in danger or putting your life in danger, but really try to seek help from other teachers, reach out to parents. Sometimes counselors have a really good relationship with students, but you wanna access and utilize all resources necessary Before you put yourself on admin's radar, make sure that you are doing everything that you can do on your own to tighten up your classroom, to create the structure that you need, the boundaries that are necessary, figure out the tone that you want to speak to your students in. Even a tone like this, I said no, later, not right now. Unfortunately, no. You don't want to be like, no, I'm sorry, you can't. No, it's like, well, maybe next time I'll get her to say yes. You want to make sure that your tone is firm. That's it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this story time. You know, it would be great if you guys can share some random, terrible teaching experiences that happened to you and some lessons that you also have learned along the way. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all in the next one.